this yesterday. I went ahead and incorporated into the Article 1 edited document, which is so far a document that contains the things we've discussed and the changes we've decided to make. I added in the smoking or the tobacco ordinances based on our discussion last time. We still had, I think, a couple of things we were looking at within those, or a couple of questions we had for the city attorney and or police. So I've noted those. I will be honest, there's one thing I was supposed to be looking at and I cannot remember what I was supposed to be looking. So I'm going to ask everyone. We had that so there's that definition of center of youth activities in the definition section, but in the state statute, it's not used anywhere. And Brentwood and U City included it, but it's not used anywhere. And then Clayton and Richmond Heights just left it out. And Sarah, we had a note, you were going to talk to Sandy about in planning and zoning, and I was supposed to be doing further research, but do you remember what I was supposed to be researching?
No, and I just found my notes from last time, and they also don't know what you were supposed to be researching.
Okay.
I can tell you, I can tell you that Sandy couldn't find anything in the planning code for that question.
About center of youth activities.
Yeah.
Because I'm on plan. There's nothing in. I agree that there's nothing in the zoning code or ordinances that would touch upon that. So basically, I think the zoning code would be limited to public uses, which would be, your parks, your churches, those types of things.
Well, I think what we're discussing today might touch on that concept, right? Like not being able to smoke in certain places. And so I don't remember what I was supposed to research, and maybe it was like, if there anywhere else in the ordinances that contain something like this, but we had our Parks Ordinance Review Committee meeting a couple weeks ago, and they're still really committed to wanting to ban smoking in parks, which I don't disagree with, but I would think we just delete this because it's not the state statute. Clearly it was someone put it in at some point and then they forgot to take it out because it's not used anywhere. And I think I searched it in the whole Missouri revised statutes. It's not used anywhere in any of the statutes. So my suggestion would be to remove that. And then when we talk about today, if we're going to talk about banning smoking in public buildings and things, we could touch on it there. Does that make sense? Or no?
Yeah. I always agree that more specificity is better. So if you're gonna, if it's gonna be a park, just say, no smoking in City of Maplewood parks or.
Okay.
And I think that one of the things that we talked about last time that you were going to look into had to do with any federal regulations that might impinge upon state or local actions. That is, if a property is receiving federal funds, is there going to be like an OSHA requirement or some other requirement that limits smoking? We had talked about. I think you were going to look into that.
Yeah, and I haven't done that. I mean, I know I had done before the last meeting. There's nothing in the OSHA guidelines. I had put in there whatever OSHA says, and there didn't seem to be a lot, but I still need to research that. So I'm going to guess there aren't, but, and it was federal regulations for if someone's receiving federal funds, right?
Yeah.
All right. I still need to do that.
So I did reach out for my assignment. I reached out, I haven't heard back on, the enforcement, county health and city ordinances. But some of the things I've been reading lately, which, again, we have to think long-term when we perhaps change ordinances. one of the things I've been reading lately is designated smoking areas, but designated pot smoking areas in public. I don't know that we're there yet, but if we're talking about smoking, do we need to keep in consideration all types of smoking or vaping?
So,
Well, yeah.
oh, go ahead, Kevin. Go ahead.
I mean, I know that it's still although it's decriminalized, I think technically it's still an offense in Maplewood,
Currently.
currently, and also, I mean, going towards, and it's still a Schedule 1 drug, rightly or wrongly under federal law. So I don't know if there's ramifications there, if it's no longer a federal Schedule 1, or if and I think it's going to be on the ballot this fall in Missouri. But I haven't looked at that language, but I think even in states where it's fully legalized, you're not allowed to smoke or vape it in a public place. So I don't know if that's going to be the case in Missouri or not.
So I just did a CLE on the ballot initiative, actually. And it, I think generally it's treated like alcohol. So like, even though people use it in different ways, like medicinally and stuff, it's still in pretty much every state treated like that. So like, you can't drink in public in Maplewood, I think is generally the ordinance. And I agree, it does get tricky with federal law. And so I don't know. I think that's an interesting question to see if anyone has made that legal. That maybe, but I think, Kevin, you raise a valid point about the problem between federal and state law and how, like, are we setting people up to be perhaps, committing a federal crime? I don't know. I don't know if that's how that works.
To be honest, I think that it will probably just be like similar to alcohol. I mean, that if people, I don't think that alcohol is strictly, drinking alcohol in public is strictly banned or people are arrested or ticketed in Maplewood. If they're walking down the street with a beer can, but if they're causing disturbances, then they might be, I don't know.
Or they'd be ticketed with peace disturbance
or something, something like that.
It's interesting though. I'd be curious to read about it and see. And I think, as like, if we set this up in a way, they can always very easily change it too. If at some point that becomes sort of a commonplace thing, I think our ordinances will be so up to date, it won't be difficult for them to incorporate something like that. Right now, clearly they're a mess because we have tobacco in one and vaping in another. And but I think, I don't know, that's an interesting thing to think about. Sheila, did you ask your friend at all about, or I think you were about rolling papers? What were their thoughts on that?
I actually haven't heard back yet.
Okay. All right.
But yes, I did. I put in a call.
Cool. Yeah, that's an interesting one to me. I'll be curious to hear the thoughts on that one.
Forget.
Because Kevin, last time we talked about, so some municipalities include rolling papers as something banned, for under 18 or 21, and some don't. And so Sheila was going to ask her friend about that, sort of, what would be maybe a reason you wouldn't, or just to get more insight into that. We have it in there for now, but we can always just delete it. So I think on this, I did reach out to Michael and asked about the sales tax thing, if we have any sort of specific sales tax for cigarettes, or that's if we needed to add that language. And then also, the business license question about whether or not in Maplewood, there's any sort of specific license specific to selling tobacco and vape products, or if it's just included in sort of your general business license. So I just sent him that yesterday, so I'm sure it's going to take him a little bit to get back to me. And then I think, and then I added those other questions to the list for the city attorney. And I did start the memorandum. Oh, the other question, and so I think this was for probably the same friend, Sheila, about the one violation a day. Yeah, okay. Because there's a provision, Kevin, we talked about last time that says you can't be liable for more than one violation of, like, you know, selling to minors or the vending machine in a day. And we were curious about that because my thought is, you know, if you violate it twice, you violate it twice. So, but the question was, is there a certain good reason to maybe keep it like that? And that's what the state statute says. And I think all the other municipalities kept that, but so. All right, so I think for what we went over, unless Kevin, did you have anything you wanted to add to any of this, or you can do it at a later date since you weren't here last time?
No, I looked it over and it looked pretty good to me.
Okay.
Subject to what, you know, the city attorney comes back and says.
Okay, awesome. So I think this time we were going to talk about the concepts of prohibiting smoking in public places, and then also prohibiting smoking on city property. And so I didn't know if everyone had a chance to look at, I put some links in that document last time. I'm trying to find it here. I have so many documents open that had links to Clayton's ordinance. Brentwood has one and U City has one. Did people get a chance to look at those? Yeah. So I'd be curious what people's thoughts are on starting with smoking. No one, Clayton was the only one that had a specific ordinance about city property. So we can do that one second. But the first one was just prohibiting in public places. What people's thoughts were on that. Unless you want me to go first.
Jump in there.
You can go ahead, Jenny.
Right. So I read through them, and I think Clayton, I think generally, I think the question, I don't think that there, and I need to go back and look, but I don't think there's state law covering this unless it's somewhere else in the code I couldn't find. I will go back, but I'm going to guess not, because not everyone has it. But my question is, so we're always asking if we're going to include it in our code, is this something that, like, we want the Maplewood police to be able to enforce, right? Like to give a ticket on, whatever. So, I mean, that's the first question. I will say, I think that that people should have a right to a smoke-free employment area. So Brentwood's focus is mostly just on, I think, employment spaces. They do have some public too, but it's not as detailed as Clayton's. So I do think that. And I also personally think people, like, if they go to a restaurant, there shouldn't be smoking, which I think is already in the county, you can't do. But I will say, like, with vaping, I think it's different, because I think, like, I was at the mall in a store and there were people vaping in a store, and I was like, what? You know, and they were employees. And so I thought that was interesting. And I don't think you should be able to do that. Like, that's smoking. But so I wasn't necessarily opposed to the concept of this because I think it was really specifically limited to public spaces and places of employment. There was a provision in Clayton's that maybe I would consider not putting in, because I think it touches on the sort of public spaces we talked about last night. And it was one where it said, like sidewalks, driveways, and other open areas within 15 feet to the entry of any building open to the public. I mean, that's nice. I would put that in, but I'd be willing to sort of compromise on some of that because I know there was some concern about, people do smoke. And so like having a space to do that in. So I don't know. I generally was sort of not opposed to this unless we think this is something that our police really don't need to be enforcing or have the time to enforce. So I'd be curious on everyone else's thoughts sort of on all of that.
I'm kind of like staying in the realm of like, is this a good policy to protect the health of people and prevent the exposure to secondhand smoke, and less about like, should the cops be the ones enforcing this, or do they have the time? Because like that is how I'm prioritizing. So I agree, like the public places and like the places of employment. Brentwood exempts bowling alleys, which is relevant for us as well. But I like what Clayton had. I think getting into the like, you're on a sidewalk, but you're X number of feet away from this type of thing is, I think, overly and unnecessarily complex. And you could solve that by like X number of feet away from any entrance to a building that isn't a private residence. That might be a way to kind of uncomplicate that maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah, I appreciate your perspective. And I agree with it. I also come from the perspective of over policing and self-determination, and leaving it up to the individual. I don't know if I shared this story with you all, but when I worked at a county court in Clayton, you couldn't smoke, right? But I think it was like X amount of feet away from the door, which is good practice. But my boss would get into it every day with the parking attendant in the underground parking lot because she smoked in her car. And like when she came into the garage or when she left the garage, and she got into it every day with the parking attendant who told her she could not smoke because she was technically on county city property. And then of course my boss was saying, no, I'm in my car. This is my personal property. So, it can get tricky, and it all depends on who feels the authority to police. And I as for our law enforcement, or law enforcement in general, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that there's enough to do. And I also think that, again, we have to look at this from an equity lens and how certain things might be applied to certain populations unfairly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We can have the best of intentions, but the impact, of course, could be otherwise.
And I think maybe, and I'll ask Matt this. I'm curious if they ever encounter issues with smoking. I mean, I know there's certain places in Maplewood you can still smoke because they were grandfathered in, but I'm curious if it's an issue. And this is also a case where we can, I think it's a valid from a policy perspective, like Sarah was saying, but I do think you can cross into issues of equity and enforcement and things like that. So, maybe this is one where, because I do, there are several municipalities who have it. I mean, they have varying forms of it, is we could offer up a version of it that we think would be fair and the council can decide, or we can reference that these exist and say, if you all would like to include this, you can. I don't know, but I don't want to make a decision before hearing from Kevin and Stefan. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this ordinance.
Well, equity is very important. And if there's an attempt to draw a straight and bright line, so we can say here's A and here's B, but that, I'm in my car, it's my personal property, you're on county property, it's the county, prerogative. It's on the one hand, it's splitting a lot of hairs, but on the other hand, we can't bright line it. I guess I'll be curious to know what the thoughts are if something, what takes priority. And before we even make a recommendation, I guess a draft recommendation amongst ourselves, I think the argument that equity and blurred lines are very important here. We need to resolve them.
And I will say this, so this one would be limited to like public. The first one was public property, so it wasn't city prop. I mean, I think some of them reference like inside city buildings because they're places of employment. But Clayton does have a separate on public property one that, no one else has. So I do see like that is it's honestly a very interesting legal question of if you're in your own personal property on public property, like, how that works. But okay. So what I hear you saying, Stefan, is like, maybe we have some questions to get answered before we even consider.
I think we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kevin, what about you? What are your thoughts?
I mean, one way to do it, and it looks like Clayton kind of took this approach, and the Missouri Human Rights Act defines places of what's the term?
Public accommodations.
Places of and then I do know that they, list places of public accommodation, and then they list a whole lot of places. So that might be one approach. I mean, and within that definition, it doesn't include roads or sidewalks or things like that. And I mean, and I think honestly, maybe that's where, you wouldn't want to ban it citywide, and because, I mean, practically speaking, you don't want someone who's walking down the street smoking a cigarette to, have a cop come up and be like, hey, that's illegal. B, I mean, we've got bars and restaurants where people smoke, whether it's, in the, and, whether they have an outdoor seating area or, or they have, I don't know, those little, like, I'm just thinking of like the Post that has a little thing outside that, people put their cigarettes in. And so, I mean, you also want to respect that, certain business owners might be like, well, our patrons want to be able to, smoke, and they'll go somewhere else if they can't do it. So, I mean, I think banning it in, like we said, like and it doesn't have to track what the MHRA says, but, the places of public accommodation makes sense to me, because I think that the county already kind of has that with the exceptions of casinos and what was it, like bars that sell less than 25% of their gross receipts are related to food or things like that.
Yeah, and I think that they reference that in both Brentwood has it like 8 if you're, well, let me see, maybe not. I think there's some reference to that in these. Well, that was my question. So the county is the one who has ordinances governing this, right? Like that's where our smoking ban came from, was the county, right? It's not a state level smoking ban,
Correct.
right? And I didn't look at the county, what they have. So maybe that's where these come from. Okay. So what do people think then the best way, how would you like to proceed on this concept? Do you want me to put together sort of a draft out of the different ones we've seen, and then also simultaneously we can ask some questions about whether this is like the police actually ever encounter this issue, or what do people want to do? You guys tell me your thoughts.
Well, I would be curious to know, one, how the city or the county defines public property.
Okay.
What do they consider public property? And so with that general definition, then I would look at a comparison of ordinances from our surrounding cities, and from there, based on what we know to be public and what they've written, whether or not it fits with us before you have to try and draft something, you'll have, a bit more information to work with, and that will give us options to discuss.
I'm going to guess that the way they've defined them in Clayton and Brentwood, I'm going to guess maybe these came from the county. I can't say because they're very similar. So they came from the same place.
Mm-hmm.
They do define public place, and they define place of employment. They define enclosed areas. So I think they seemed pretty fairly written. It says like public place is any enclosed or other area to which the public is invited, or in which the public is permitted, including but not limited to banks, educational facilities, reception areas, health facilities, laundering facilities, public transportation facilities, reception areas again, production and marketing establishments, retail service establishments, retail stores, theaters, and waiting room. A private residence is not a public place unless it is used as a childcare, adult daycare, or healthcare facility. So it's pretty clear. And then I think Kevin was right. Like, none of these, they seem to be limited to, enclosed spaces, except for then in Clayton where they had that provision against the 15 feet from entrances, right? Which we could, to help to address the problem, like with you're right, Kevin, like the Post, there is no other space outside of that restaurant other than on the sidewalk that someone could go to smoke. And, mostly people are doing that at night when other businesses may be closed. So you have less, because my office is right there. And there are times when I come down and people are like my door is right next to theirs and there's people smoking on my whatever, but not often, and they move. But I will research what the county has and see stuff to address your thing. See if that's where this came from. That might be very well where it came from. And maybe the city, I don't know if the city of St. Louis has anything. I would imagine they have something, but I don't know. Do you know, Sarah?
I'm looking right now.
Okay.
The city has no smoking.
All right. So I can look that up and see if they have different things.
Then after we have accumulated that information, we can then consider enforcement. What does it mean? What does it look like? And who would be enforcing it?
So that's an interesting question because in Brentwood, it's actually the fire marshal and not the police is the way I read theirs, right? It says that the public code enforcement officer is the fire marshal or his or her designee. And then so it's more of a safety issue, I guess, in that sense than like a violating but the penalty in Brentwood is just a person who smokes in an area is $25 fine for the first violation, 50 for each subsequent. But then if it's a person who owns, manages, or operates the space or controls it, 50 for the first, 100 for the second, 200 for anything after that. Clayton's, though, they keep with their, which I don't think you should be jailed for smoking. So they keep theirs is, but fines are also not great, right? And when you're talking about equity, if it's being enforced against population of people who maybe doesn't have as much, the means to pay for it, then the fine is also a problem. So that is something I wanted to talk about. Clayton's is the regular up to 1,000 or jail not to exceed 90 days, which for smoking in public seems very extreme, in my opinion. Maybe if you're a business owner who keeps violating it, then maybe not, but for someone who's caught smoking, and I don't know.
So in Maplewood, Sarah, is that enforcement? I mean, there's liquor control from the state, but is it the health department that will be looking at these things in Maplewood currently or potentially?
I think it depends. So if the county has banned indoor smoking, which I think honestly they already have, and I have a feeling it applies to incorporated and unincorporated anyways. So even if we change our ordinance, the county ordinance trumps whatever change we make. And so it could be that I'll have to find the section of the code for the county, because it depends where it's placed. It's
I'll look that up.
Yeah, I'm looking for it too. And it looks like it's in the health code.
Indoor clean air code, I'm guessing is
Yeah, that's enforced by the health department.
And these definitions come from the county, it looks like.
Yeah.
So does this whole list of places. So Clayton's looks like maybe it just copies the counties.
Yeah, so the health department is the one that enforces that. That's our environmental division and like our restaurant inspectors, and we've got other inspectors who respond to these types of complaints, and they would issue tickets, which would include a fine, and then it takes a long time, honestly, for that area of our department to get anywhere near legal action. They very much take a educate first sort of standpoint, but yeah, that's the health department.
So then the distinction here would be, I guess, what we're then deciding is, do we feel the need for Maplewood to be able to issue a Maplewood ordinance violation for something that currently the county health department already has the authority to regulate, right? To come in. So I mean, I'm sure people don't know, so that's the question, I guess, we're answering.
It seems we're answering it for indoor facilities.
Yeah, this is,
I mean,
this is, oh, sorry, Kevin, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jenny.
No, this particular ordinance is limited to basically places where people work, places where people visit inside. Yes.
I would be curious for a restaurant's reaction to this, right? If I'm a restaurant that doesn't want smoking inside and I lose the ability to sort of refer to the Maplewood ordinance to inform customers of that, that could put businesses in a weird spot. And I'll be honest, our ability, the health department's ability to respond to this type of complaint instantly is really limited.
Yeah.
it's very much like after we've received a complaint. And if it's, outside of business hours or on the weekend, it may not be responded to for a while.
Do you
So,
know, Sarah,
of it.
what like are most of the complaints just have to do with like bars allowing smoking and they're not supposed to, or things like that?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't have a great idea of like what
Okay.
types of, because they have like their own like inbox.
Yeah,
that can
no,
answer
yeah.
this.
And it seems like it would be the same approach if Maplewood had it in its ordinances. The response time that Sarah's talking about at the county, the response time for Maplewood locally, and what the financial impact would be if you got to hire people, and how quickly you're going to respond, and or is it just going to be 2 levels of backup that a backlog, 2 levels of backlog that never really is acted upon because they don't have time to get to every place where there might be a potential violation. And if there is one and the county's rules take precedent, does Maplewood really want it? Having it.
So if our ordinance matches, right, then so the way that works is like unless there's something in here that says we can, like as long as it's the same, then either one you can give them right. Like you can use either. It's where if ours is like more restrictive than the counties, then the counties would apply, right? We can't make ours more restrictive, which that's our choice, right? Like, so we would be cognizant of that, wouldn't do that. So we shouldn't have that issue, I guess, of like the police trying to apply something they can't do, right? We would prevent that by the way we write it. But the police would have to respond right away, right? Our police, right, would have to respond, I would think, more quickly based on the way than like the county would. But I guess again, the question is, curious to hear maybe how many, I wonder, do you know, Sarah, if someone can find out how many complaints the county gets about a certain municipality?
I would be surprised if they tracked it by municipality. They probably
Okay.
track it by zip code. But I can ask for our zip code and see.
That would
They've
be
got that.
awesome.
Because
Yeah.
I mean, my perception is that it's, indoor smoking has been,
Yeah.
over 10, like,
Yeah.
just like ballpark, it's been over 10 years.
Yeah,
Right.
this was 09
Yeah.
in the county.
Yeah. So like, I never see going into businesses or restaurants in Maplewood, like people pulling out a cigarette
But
and
it's the
lighting up.
vaping.
But it's the vaping is
That's what's different.
The vaping is what's different now.
And I do see people doing that inside all the time. And I
Right.
guess to me, that's what hooks me to this is the vaping.
Right.
It's not
Right.
really the smoking, because I agree with you. People don't smoke inside because it's so obvious, but the vaping, and they don't know, right? How
Right.
they still don't know how bad it is. And I just saw the FDA, Juul has to remove all their products from the US market. So that's the thing that gets me is the
Yeah.
vaping inside.
Courts have blocked the FDA's action.
Have they?
Yes.
They filed an appeal.
Okay. And I haven't read into it, but I'm just saying, like, I know there's just not enough research to know yet, like the impact of that smoke that comes
It
off.
would just be nice if people had common sense and common courtesy.
I know.
We wouldn't have to sit here talking about this.
Well,
I know.
we'd live in a much better world, Sheila.
I know, right?
I
Wouldn't need these laws.
I'm
These
just
laws.
nervous.
Yeah, I know.
If the county has it, and let the county deal with it. I don't want our police officers having to enforce this, and we do have code enforcement officers, but I am so nervous as to how this could disproportionately affect people. I'm thinking about the bus stop, the Yale bus stop. People sit there and smoke. they stand there and they
That's city-
smoke.
I mean, that's city property,
It's city
right?
property.
Yeah.
Now,
which we're not talking about now, right? So like that would not be part of this. Like that is a separate ordinance, which I am fine. Like I think not, inside public city buildings, obviously no, but like, we don't have to touch outside of, though in parks, I know the parks, like not allowing smoking in parks is something that the Parks Ordinance Review Committee really, which makes sense to me, right?
Yeah.
Like whatever.
yeah. So if someone owns their business, they own the building.
Sometimes, yes.
Or they're a tenant and they have.
Yeah, I mean,
right of
I don't
control
own the
over it.
building,
They
my
have, but they have right of control over.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are 2, I don't know, I'm gonna say 2 Maplewood businesses that allow smoking indoors.
Yeah, they were grandfathered in. I think it's McLean's and Foley's, right? Were the
Foley's.
2 that were, maybe the bowling alley too, like
Bowling
Saratoga. Yeah. So,
Pulling out for sure.
which, and I don't, and like we said, like, the county would control. So we wouldn't be touching any of that. And again, I mean, I agree with you, Sheila. I think there's always, especially with smoking, and there is that chance. I guess the ultimate question is, I think we're very divided on like how we feel about that. I guess the question for me is this something then we want to present to the city council and let them discuss? I mean, they're the policymakers as to whether or not we can put in our memo, like all the reasons we may have for it, the reasons we may have against it, the concerns we have, where it may help, and then they can decide, if they would like to do something like this, or what.
I think the substantial thing that we have proposed with all of these ordinances for this particular one, I think the substantial one is raising the age to 21.
Can I make one possible compromise here with respect to the indoor smoking or vaping? And that's there would be no individual penalty for it. Looking at like Clayton or Brentwood, it would be a code violation. So it wouldn't, so whether you're looking at like fire marshal or code enforcement officer, but then it would be the fine of the the owner of the business or the owner of the building. That's why there's the incentive of like Jenny, if you go into a shop in Maplewood and the staff is all sitting around vaping, you can call City Hall and just say, hey, I'm at XYZ and people are smoking in there, and a code enforcement officer can come, and if they sees people smoking or vaping, they can say, okay, and we can structure it, warning, and then, and I think looking at Brentwood, you have a, step-by-step fine process that would go, and then at that point, it's the business owner, it's up to them to say, hey, you need to go outside because I keep getting fined for, for people smoking or vaping in here.
I think that's a great idea, Kevin, because you're eliminating the individual smoker being penalized for smoke, right? Like I think that's a way to address that concern. I mean, that seems like that's what we're concerned about, right? It's not really necessarily the person doing it. It's the idea of allowing it to happen in a public place.
That it's a place of public accommodation.
Right.
So everyone should be able to access it equally and, and not be, irritated or their health put at risk because of, just because they have every right to be there as anybody else.
Okay, just one last thing, because I'm going through this all in my head and thinking about businesses that I've been in, and there's some businesses you walk in and no one's currently smoking in there, but at some point someone lit a joint or whatever, and you can smell it, right? How does that fit in? I'm very sensitive to smell. Certain smells I do not enjoy. And I had said to a building owner, I said, this is a non-smoking building, so why is this person allowed to, smoke indoors? And they're like, well, we can't enforce it because what if they have a medical card or something? I just see a lot of potential complications, or I could definitely see a lot of complications.
So I think that Missouri medicinal marijuana law includes like you can only consume this in private.
In your own home.
Right.
It's limited to like
And so-
your house, not even anyone
Right.
else's house.
Right.
Well, that's
and so
You know,
like that's state law that you can't, so that it's still enforceable, right? That if a business is permitting it, they can still be reported.
so does that fall into this ordinance at all?
No,
No.
because this
This
isn't about
would be
marijuana at
because
all.
this is just
limited to
tobacco, alternative nicotine, like vape. I
Okay.
think it would be limited to anything that produces like smoke or whatever. Like if someone's
So how
dipping,
does that, I don't even know if they're open. Isn't there a hookah bar or hookah lounge?
So
I
it
mean-
does permit it. So like all these have an exception where if like a certain percentage of your sale is tobacco or you know what I mean? So like
So
a
if it's
place
like
like
a-
that would be
like a cigar shop or
Yes,
a cigar bar.
that would
or
be
a hookah
allowed.
lounge. Yeah.
And we can choose, again, I guess we have to look at the county, but it looks like Clayton literally copied the counties. So, they've included all that stuff. Cigar bar, drinking establishments, private clubs, things like that. They've sort of gone through all that. I'm sure this was all of this was very heavily discussed, like those various places when they made this. So I'm thinking this counties covers anything we have. And like we said, we couldn't prohibit it then.
Did we talk about dog parks?
So that would be if the dog park is considered a park. So if the park ordinance bans smoking in parks, then it would be banned there.
Yeah, I think Maplewood's ordinances specifically address dog parks, and any complaints go to the public works director.
For smoking or just in the dog park generally?
For smoking.
In the dog
They're
park.
on the fence, leaning over the fence, inside the dog park, etc.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's the same as code enforcement. If the
No,
public
and
works-
those, and they
so
really
we have
shouldn't.
a different enforcement mechanism is what I'm getting at.
Well, I think that may be just, I don't know that those questions should be going to Public Works, right? Like, I think people just don't know too, like who you're supposed to call. And so my guess is that gets routed then once it gets to Public Works, they route it somewhere else. But I don't know.
We're at 36-115. The Public Works Director of Public Works may direct any person inside if it is determined that the city of Maplewood's rules.
Yeah.
They
can kick you out. Yes, they can. And we are changing that to the
Mhm.
city manager or their designee because they have all kinds of use different language. But yes. And those ordinances are all being updated. And honestly, a lot of stuff that's currently in the parks ordinances shouldn't be ordinances. They're going to be moved to a policy manual.
Okay.
And those ordinances are going to be much simpler because, it's silly.
So 36-115 talks about license suspension and revocation. So it's not just a park thing, it's a penalty thing.
Well, but it's specific to those ordinances, right?
Yeah,
So like,
yeah.
so and currently, yeah. So like, if again, like this particular ordinance we're talking about now has nothing to do with city property except enclosed spaces, right? So any outdoor space city property wide is not touched by this. But I will say in the Parks Ordinance Committee, they would like to ban parking or smoking in parks. So then, but again, our penalty, there would be no fine. It would be, you have to leave, right? And then, I mean, that's sort of what we talked about, not, you know, it's just that you have to stop. And then the parks director, whoever, can kick you out of the park, right? They have that authority. Like that's what it would be. They do also have the authority to, which we've talked about, impose any other fine or whatever allowed under the code. But, you know, our goal would not be for someone to be ticketed for that. It would just be like, you got to leave, you got to stop, you got to leave. But this, we're just talking about like inside spaces. And so like we've talked about, the county already does ban that. So it is illegal to smoke inside in Maplewood already. And the question is just, do we want to create a Maplewood ordinance that also says that, so that if it happens, the police can respond right away and address it? Because it sounds like at the county level, it takes time and it really, you know, may not. And I think Kevin's suggestion is a good one to address the concerns about an individual smoker, where like there's no penalty against an individual smoker. So you'd be removing any provision talking about like a penalty towards an individual smoker who violates it, right? It would be focused solely on businesses who are allowing people to smoke or vape inside in violation of the ordinance. It would still allow, like, you know, like the crow's nest, you can smoke on the patio there. Like we wouldn't change that, right? Like you would still be allowed to do that. We wouldn't, I think what I hear is like, maybe we wouldn't put any provision in relating to 15 feet from the door, right? Because then you would be affecting businesses like the Post or, you know, so.
Or just walking down the sidewalk, really.
Right, like that would not be, because sidewalks are, I think sidewalks are exempted specifically, like it says
Right.
that, like, I think maybe, I don't know, in one of them it did. So that, I guess that's what I see we're talking about making it like, making an ordinance about. And I guess my question is, I feel like we're sort of like divided on that as a group. And so my question is, I think that there are people who maybe would be in favor of doing this and maybe people who wouldn't be. And what we could do is, when we've spent a lot of time talking about it, is we could offer it to the council and let them decide if that's something that they think, you know, they could, sort of that's their job, right? Is to make policy. But I think it's fair to give it to them along with a synopsis of our discussion and our concerns. And I do think it would be beneficial to maybe come up with a version of it that we're all comfortable with to offer that addresses all those concerns. They can clearly modify it, but I think it's always easiest to give people sort of what we like, something that addresses all those things. And then maybe they're less likely to put something in that someone was against, if that makes sense. I don't know. And I don't mind putting something together to give to you guys to look at and comment on and change based on this conversation if you want. But if people don't want to do that, I don't want to spend the time doing it, because it's a lot of work.
The only thing that and I'm not divided on this issue at all. The only thing that really does not sit well with me is the law enforcement aspect. I'd
be curious, Brentwood's is the fire marshal, so I'd be curious how that works. You know, do we have a fire marshal? I guess.
I think it's, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's Brian Herr.
It is.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I think if no one's strongly opposed to it, I always do better seeing something
Okay.
on paper and then, you know,
Okay.
we can kind of look at, I would say, look at it and discuss it. And you know, and if people are uncomfortable with certain provisions, we can either revise it, take them out, or just say, let's ditch this whole thing and just keep what the county has. But, you know, I do think keeping out the individualized makes
Yeah.
sense based on, you
Yeah.
know, Sheila's concerns and other concerns that are raised. Just put it on the, you know, it's the business owner or the property owner who, you know, if they want to let people smoke or vape in their establishment, then
They pay a fine.
you're going to pay a fine.
I mean, because that's the point of it to me, really. It's
Right.
not about penalizing someone who's smoking. It's about the idea that you shouldn't be smoking inside. And that's really at the control of the person who owns the business.
Right. And if you have a business where you don't have people coming from the public and you want to let your employees smoke or vape and there's no risk of that, then fine. You know, but if you're going to have people coming in, you know, and shopping or eating, then, you know, you run the risk.
I do think it's illegal, though, for any place of employment to allow it based on the.
Right. But I'm saying,
Yeah.
but
You're
know,
saying what you would not put that in our ordinance?
no.
Okay.
Well, no, I think it's any employment place, but it's,
Okay.
but what I'm saying is that it's always going to be on the
owner. to
business
pay a fine.
owner,
Right. Okay. I got
the tenant,
I got
the
you.
owner of the property, you
I
know,
got
it's going to be on, it's going to be on them.
Okay. Well, then I can do that. I will put something together and send it to you guys to look at. And we can discuss it. Oh, this smoking stuff is taking a long time, hasn't it?
Need a smoke break.
Right? And it's 10 o'clock. And so I don't know if we wanted to start talking a little bit about Article 2, which is just curfew, or if people want to stop here and do it next time.
I can go until like 10:15, but yeah, if somebody else is, if we're all done, I'm fine with that too.
In favor of ending, just because I have one major thing that I wanted just to know about curfew, and that's, is this ever enforced? It's what it comes into one of those, and we had this discussion, I think, early on, like, you know, there are certain things in here. Do the police ever, is it ever, you know, is it ever used is my one question. And if we don't know, it might be valuable to, you know, ask Matt or, you know, or someone in the police department, you know,
That's a good point, Kevin. Good point.
Yeah.
And I think it would save a lot of time too.
Yeah, because they might say
Yeah.
we've never issued a citation under this, and we can say, let's scrap it, because I
If we're
think,
taking all the ordinances and sit down with them and go through it all at one time. Because I think what we've been doing is, okay, we're talking about one ordinance and okay, I'll go talk to chief, or we're talking about another one. And someone else goes to talk, you know what I mean? So let's just sit down, go through it all. And that might save us a lot of time and energy.
Well, and remember I had asked him to do that, and then it got really busy, and I haven't followed up, and I was going to follow up with him this week. And so I will do that. And then, so if we want to do that, I think we might need to look ahead and see what questions we would have for them. I mean, that's the hard part when you're looking at the whole thing, is that it gets very overwhelming. And so that's why I was trying to sort of take chunks and put it together and then like meet with them and talk about like these 3 articles. And then, but we did ask him, and so I need to remind him and ask him to go through and tell us what they might or might not need. And I agree, because I know Sarah's like, I was talking to my friend about curfew, and you know, things have changed, and like kids maybe stay out later or whatever. And she's like, and I was trying to explain to him, like, well, you can't be out past this time unless it's for work or whatever. Because, you know, she looked at the ordinance or whatever, and it's so confusing. And honestly, if a kid's out past curfew, like, it seems stupid to me for them to get a ticket for that. Like, if they're not doing anything, right?
and there's going to be other things in the
then
code.
there's a different ordinance violation, I'm sure.
If you know, if a kid's out, you know, breaking windows or drinking or something like that, then there's going to be other things in the code that they're going to get in trouble for, other than just, you know, walking down the street with their friends at 12:05.
And I think this is one from an equity lens that has the propensity to be disproportionately applied against certain groups of people. So I agree with you. So I will follow up and ask that. So that's a good point. And I will also ask Matt if he could go through at least, especially like the next few chapters we're going to do or whatever, or articles, so that as we're working forward, we at least have their response on those, if it's going to take him a while. Does that make sense? So that we're okay. So for next time, then I will have this drafted and send to you. And we can just the proposed smoking, public places smoking. I'm assuming we don't want to touch city property. Smoking on city property, or is that something we want to talk about?
Well, that would just be, I think it's
inside.
Inside. So you're
Not
talking
outside.
about, yeah.
Okay.
Let's leave the outside thing for a different.
Okay. And then well, I'll ask about the curfew. And then the one after curfew is gonna be a long one too. Because I think it's what is it? I gotta find the right. It's pornography. There's a lot of problematic stuff in that, just in terms of, so that one's going to be a doozy, I think. So next time we can finish smoking and do have answers about curfew and talk about that. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
When do people want to meet? The end of July sometime.
Maybe the weekend of the 23rd.
That would work for me because I might be gone the next weekend.
Yeah, I'm on vacation the 23rd,
Okay.
but
I'm working. I
Okay.
have an event that day.
Would August 6th work for people?
I'll be gone, but if that works for you all, I can watch the recording.
August the 6th. Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
Right now, I'm clear.
the 6th or the 13th.